there's two main ways that people skate for aggressive setups, anti-rocker and flat. Anti-rocker is when you have little wheels in the middle, big wheels on the outside. And what that does is it gives you a bigger space and a much smoother, faster area for grinds. And that's really the main motivation behind running anti-rocker. You see freestyle. Freestyle is a system that doesn't have wheels. The frame is designed for just grinding. So it would have a groove in the middle that kind of goes to a point almost. It's designed for grinds. You can't put wheels in the middle. It's very similar to anti-rocker, same concept. Outside wheels are the ones that touch and you grind on the inside. And then there's flat. So flat, as I define it, is when you have four wheels touching the ground at all times. And that could be all four wheels the same size. That could be all four wheels touching, but maybe the outside wheels are slightly larger than the inside wheels. There are a lot of different ways that you can have a flat setup, but for today, I'm just going to consider anything when any setup has all four wheels touching at the same time. So a little bit of history. When we all started skating, all that we had were flat setups, There was no anti-rocker. We didn't think about little wheels on the inside for grinding because there really wasn't a grind. Especially when you had these old Lightning TRS. So these were like the first skate that people rode, and they're flat. These are 72 mil wheels, and they were great, but they were great for skating around town. They were great for jumping stairs, riding stairs, doing gaps, maybe a little bit of half pipe, but they weren't grinding with this setup. The first time they started doing grinds was when they were skating with this skate, but they would swap out these wheels for either skateboard wheels, or they wore down their wheels to a point where it was so low it was almost on the core of the wheel. And they would have little wheels, like 55 maybe. So they would have four 55 millimeter wheels. They'd get rid of the brake, of course. This is just there for show. But if you had small wheels, you could just grind in the middle. And they were simulating what they saw in skateboarding, which was, the 50-50 grinds, the 5-0 grinds, things like that, backsides. It wasn't until they started really grinding that they started realizing that, hey, anti-rocker was a thing. And anti-rocker really changed the game for grinding. The first and the last wheels being big, the middle wheels being small, really gave a lot of options for skating any sort of obstacle that you wanted. Ledges, rails, fat rails, coping, you name it, you could skate it with an anti-rocker setup. But you lost that freedom of mobility that you would get with a flat setup. There is nothing better than skating with all four wheels touching at the same time. So how do you make it work, right? You can't, so where's my rail? Oh, I think I put my rail away. I had a rail. I don't have a rail anymore. But it's hard to skate this setup if you've only got, 1 1/4 finger in the middle, right? So how do you make it work? Well, what people started doing, and the first real flat setup that I skated, was simply just a slightly larger split in the middle and little wheels. So it's kind of like this one. So this is the K2 Fatty Pro. This was one of the first skates that I ever skated flat. I didn't skate them very much, but when I did, I definitely skated flat. I did probably skate flat with some of my other setups, but I was seriously into anti-rocker back in the times when these first came out. These are 4 55 millimeter wheels. So they're made by Cosmo. They're so old. So Cosmo was one of the classic wheel companies from the day. They were amazing. And Cosmo made a 55 millimeter wheel. What was interesting about Cosmo is, so 55 millimeters, you could see that, I've got a little bit more than 2, almost 3 fingers right in the middle. What was interesting about Cosmo is this skate that I told you about. So this skate, You can kind of see it without me. Let me see, does this show? Yeah. You can kind of see there's like this little plastic piece in the middle. These frames are actually rockerable. So you can move the wheels up and down. Is it just the middle wheels? No, so the middle wheels go up and down. The outside wheels go out and in. So what you could do is you could ride these skates with some Cosmo 55 millimeter wheels on the insides and rocker them up. And then you would get some 62 millimeter wheels, I think. And you would rocker them down. So it was the mini flies on the inside and the flywheels on the outside. And that was called a flat rocker system. It's flat. I mean, you're still riding with all four wheels flat. But the interesting thing about these skates is that the rocker system allowed us to rocker the inside wheels down and rocker the outside wheels so that it created this flat skating setup, but the wheels were smaller on the inside. Remember that. It's going to come into, it's going to become important for you to remember that in the future frame discussion. So that was one of the first setups that I ever had. I definitely skated flat rocker for a while. I skated flat for a while, and that was great. You know, I skated with a little bit of K2 fatties. I skated 50/50 frames when they first came out. I skated those flat. When the UFS frames came out, I skated those flat. So this is what those look like. So these are a UFS 50/50 frame. This is a balanced frame. It's like the third generation of the 50/50 frame, the second generation of the UFS 50/50 frame. And these are 56 millimeter wheels. You can see in the inside, this has like a 3-finger split. So compared to that K2 fatty that people were skating, which had a 55 millimeter wheel and a 2-finger split, this is a 56 millimeter wheel and a 3-finger split. Now back in these days, a lot of skates actually came flat, and it's really hard to find a skate that comes flat nowadays. But skates came flat because I think everybody agreed that the optimal way to skate is with a flat setup. And worst case scenario, if you wanted to skate Antirocker, all you would do is you would get that skate from the shelf, you would remove these 2 middle wheels, you put your Antirocker wheels in the middle, and then now you've got 2 extra wheels for when these outside wheels wear down. So it wasn't a huge deal. So we skated flat. A lot of people skated Antirocker. Skates came flat. The Solomons are a good example. So these are some Salomon STI Pros. They come with Senate wheels. These are 56 mil 88A Senate wheels. This has slightly larger split. They are also rockerable. These are rockered out, which is great. It's got a little bit more than 3 fingers, so slightly larger split than the 50/50 balance frames. But you could skate these just fine. 56 millimeter wheels, nice 3-finger split, no problem. So we skated this for a very, very, very long time. Flat was kind of the way that core skaters skated, you know? Like Antirocker was always this like cheating thing back in the days. And then there was a big shift when I think freestyle came out. So 50/50 came out with juice blocks, which were a block, like a molded piece of plastic that you fit in to fill the wheel. Well, I actually have one up here. So this is a juice block. And I don't have an open 50/50 frame. Oh, I have this white one somewhere. So this is what juice blocks look like. So juice blocks go in here and they create a Antirocker setup. So you put big wheels on the outside. Antirocker setup, but you didn't have to worry about wheels on the inside. And that kind of, not saying that this started the revolution, but around the time that this came out is when that transition from skating flat was the norm to skating Antirocker was the norm kind of began. So not only with this, but with freestyle frames, where you had that lack of middle wheel, people were just skating big wheels on the outside and no wheels on the inside, or they were skating freestyle without freestyle frames. They would just remove the middle wheels, and they would just skate wheels on the outside and then just, grind on the inside. So it was a big shift, and that's kind of how things have been for a very long time. It's really hard to find a pair of skates nowadays that comes with a flat setup. Maybe the only ones that I can think of that come out of the box with a flat setup are the Roman Abrate and the K2 Unnaturals or Front Streets. The others all come Antirocker. And there's a reason for that. Antirocker is a great setup for grinding. I actually have these rollerblades. These are actually on a razor shift. But you can see that this is a rollerblade frame, rollerblade blank frame. This was designed to skate Antirocker. So if I remove these middle wheels, these are little Antirocker plastic wheels that don't even roll. But these are an Antirocker frame. So if I were to put these wheels, these 58 millimeter wheels on the inside, you could see that they would definitely roll up, and there'd be no way to keep your wheels from sticking. Even though it has this big 4-finger split, the wheels are going to rub, and whenever a wheel rubs, you're going to get wheel bite. So wheel bite is when these wheels, so the Antirocker wheels are much harder than the outside wheels. Antirocker wheels usually are around 100 A. The A is the durometer, which is the hardness of the wheel. These for normal skating are, I don't know how, they're 90 A. So a normal wheel is anywhere from 88 to 92 A. You'll find some wheels that get all the way up to 95 A, but those are mostly for flat setups that you're really into grinding. For the most part, you're going to find wheels on the outside that are around 88 to 92. So imagine putting a 90A wheel on the inside. As soon as this thing hits a rail or hits a ledge, you're just going to stick. So what did they do, right? So people obviously wanted to skate bigger wheels, but there was a need for flat. Well, I was actually out of the industry at the time. I stopped skating in 2005. And I just got back into it in 2016. So I missed this whole revolution of flat frame design. When I left, the balance frame and the core system frames were kind of the, not the best, but as far as I was concerned, the best designed for a flat frame. There really wasn't a lot of advances because I think at that time we were more interested in freestyle frames and we were interested in suspension frames like the physics frame. So over the years, since that freestyle movement kind of slowed down, companies started making flat frames that were designed for flat. Just like this frame is designed for Antirocker, they were making frames that were designed for flat. Now, I don't know the dates. I'm going to mess up all the years. So, and I'm going to miss a few of the frames. And I only have a few of them here. I will mention as many as I can think of, but there are plenty of great companies out there that have moved the flat movement to the point where today it's never been easier to skate flat. So I'm going to show you a few of the different flat frames that I have in my collection. I'm going to mention a few that maybe were contributing to these designs. And then I'll talk to you about where we are today with flat and why, personally, I think flat is an amazing setup for you to skate. And if you haven't skated it recently, you definitely should. So first, one of my older frames for flat, maybe not the older frame, is this crazy Kaiser Element. So I think this came out in 2012. I could be totally wrong because I don't know. The Kaiser Element is a really interesting frame. So it is a aluminum frame. If you look down here, you can see this is a extruded aluminum frame. And the way that an extrusion works is it's kind of like Play-Doh. Did you ever have Play-Doh when you were a kid? Or Play-Doh now, I'm not going to judge. If you put a bunch of Play-Doh in and you push that thing down and it comes out kind of like pasta, like you're making spaghetti or you're making rotini or fettuccine, I don't know any other. Those are the only pastas that I know. So what they do is they get the metal, the aluminum, and they put it into this big thing and it squirts out and it's an extrusion. So if you look down, It's this perfect extrusion, the curves and everything. So the gold is the aluminum part, and then they go in and they machine it and they cut out the little UFS mounts. They cut out the little holes so that you can screw the frame in. This frame also has a plastic part that slaps on. There are 2 on each side, and then there's an H block that is reversible, I learned today, that you can convert from a anti-rocker setup to a flat setup. And if you look at this, there's a noticeable difference between this frame and like the old balance frame that I was used to when I left. I mean, not only from the length. So these Kaiser elements are a little longer. They're probably like 275 millimeters. These are 270 millimeter. But look at that split. This thing's crazy. So how did they do it, right? How did they make this frame? Well, for starters, they kind of gave up on the whole UFS thing. So if you look at the UFS bolts on the top, you can see that there are 2 bolts. These bolts are 167 millimeters apart. So the center of this bolt and the center of this bolt, 167 millimeters. Typically, that becomes a problem when you're trying to make a flat frame, or any frame for that matter. Because if you look at the bottom of the frame, you can see actually the bolts are in here. You can't move these wheels out any further without rubbing on the UFS bolts. So what did Kaiser do? Well, they just said, screw it, we don't care. We're going to make the frame a little taller, right? But we're going to move it out. So the bolt can still fit in there. It's kind of hard to see. The bolt can still fit in there, but you've got so much space. These wheels are almost as close as they can get. These are 58 millimeter Conjure brand flats. And this is an amazing flat setup. I haven't skated these. These are in my collection. I missed this whole time when they were available. They feel really heavy, to be completely honest. And I've heard, the weight is an issue. The number of parts is an issue. You look at all the screws. There's a lot going on in this frame. But this design is incredible. So this is an amazing flat frame. This is the Kaiser Element. Another flat frame that I am super interested in. So this is the Kaiser, a lot of Kaiser, right? Kaiser loves these flat frames. This is the Kaiser Level 3.1 frame. This is what they call the power blading frame. These fit 4 72 millimeter wheels. 72 millimeter, can you believe that? So 4 72 millimeter, they're still UFS, so you can mount them just fine, just like any other UFS frame. They feature a nice groove, a good split. You can see the gap is fairly close. These are 72 millimeter wheels. I bet you could probably get a 74 in there, but I don't think anybody makes a 74. It's got the little nubs on the side to protect you from sole grinds. I actually skated these at a skate park the other week, and they were great. Really difficult for Royales though. So because it was so high, that angle that I was trying to get at with the Royale, I kept slipping out on my boot. A lower frame is a little easier for Royales. You don't have to get as low when you're trying to get boot down. And for me, I'm getting old. My legs aren't super strong anymore. My balance sucks. So I think that some people could skate these really well. I had a really good time skating them. I think they'd be fine for groove tricks. Royale tricks were a little difficult. Sole tricks were fine. And I would imagine most tricks are fine. It's just the Royale that was difficult. But if you look at the unique properties of this H block, so instead of just being a standard H block like the old balance frame, so if you look at the balance frame, the frame goes flat, perfectly flat across. This has what I would consider some wheel bite protection. So the frame doesn't just go flat. The frame actually extends lower than it needs to. So if you look at this side, you can see this angle that's cut into the frame wall. So the frame is still pretty low, but it gives it a lot of support. And then if you were to do, a front side or a sole grind, you're grinding on this plastic still. You're not grinding on the wheel. It's really hard to grind on the wheel. And that's really interesting. So this is like what I would consider a wheel bite protection on the H block. I don't have any, but the first frame that I've heard had wheel bite protection was the Cultic frame, the Cultic flat frame. The flat frame has a fairly deep groove. I think it fit a max of 60 millimeter wheels. I might be wrong, but it had a fairly deep groove, but it was a lower profile frame and it had really great wheel bite protection. The problem with these frames is that you really have to skate the big wheels. So if you skated these frames with a 62 millimeter wheel, you would have some problems because this H-block area would probably rub. It's not really designed for that. It's designed for a really big 72 millimeter wheel. Ground Control makes a couple frames like this as well. They make the big frame, which is a 72 millimeter wheel. Similar design, similar concept. I've never skated them, so I can't speak for them. The Ground Control Mega frame is, again, a similar concept. It fits a 65 millimeter wheel. So the split is probably about the same, maybe a little bigger. The H-block wheel bite protection is a little better. The groove is a little deeper, which means that it's a little easier to do Royale tricks. But the 65, I mean, flat 65 has got to feel great. So I want to get my hands on a pair of those. I haven't been able to yet, but I will soon, I hope. And I think Cultic makes some other good flat frames. I don't know the Cultic line very well, but I know that they've been really pioneers with flat setups. Really, really impressed with their lines. And I think their V2 flat frame just came out, which has interesting rockering diagonally, which means that you can come up with some really interesting setups for your flat frames. All right, so that's the Kaiser. The last one that I wanted to show before I get to the main event is the K2. So I haven't skated these yet. I haven't skated these yet, but these are the K2 unnatural frames. You can see clearly what the wheel bite protection looks like in these frames. So the wheels go in here. Do I have a 60? I don't know what size this is. Ooh, I should have a 60 up there somewhere. Here, these are 60 millimeter wheels. So 60 millimeter wheel, you could see what it looks like. So that wheel bite protection is very similar to what you saw on the level 3.1, but because the wheels are so much lower and the ride height is lower, these are probably a lot more forgiving on Royales. You can see that wheel bite protection, that will keep you, you'll be grinding on here, you won't be touching the wheels. I'm really interested in skating these frames. I have these ones set up. So these are my K2 front streets. I plan on setting them up this weekend and skating them this weekend, weather permitting. But you can see this wheel bite protection is incredible. Like, that's a nice big groove for skating. I don't see any issues there. If you look down the channel, the wheels are something I didn't talk about, but the profile of the wheel makes a lot of difference in flat setups as well. If they're a big square wheel like the Conjure flats, they might bite a little bit more because that angle, when you're trying to do a groove trick, might rub a little bit more with a flat wheel, square wheel, than it would with a more of a profiled wheel. These don't have a super intense profile, but they're fairly intense. If you got some speed profile wheels, like I don't know if anybody makes a speed profile wheel anymore, but if they were more like a bullet, you wouldn't have any issues with wheel bite. That's probably the ideal design for a flat wheel, but that's why we test. So these are the front streets. These frames are extremely long, so I'm not really sure how these are going to feel. I got the other frames as well to test, but this setup is really interesting to me because it's another great example of wheel bite protection. I think that this is the goal for any flat designed frame. Now, this does not work for Antirocker. You could skate at Antirocker, of course. I mean, you could make anything work. But it's designed for skating flat. It's designed for skating with all four wheels touching. So that is the gamut of the standard flat UFS frames. Now there's one exception, and that's the Wish frame. So this is the Wish frame. So I just got these back and skated them last week. They're great frames to skate. As you can see, it is still a flat setup. So I've got all 4 wheels touching the ground at the same time. These are 72 millimeter on the outside, 60 millimeter on the inside. Now remember, I told you, don't forget about that TRS Cosmo flat rocker discussion. This is a flat rocker frame. So it's flat, every wheel touches at the same time. You could argue that it's a slight rocker. I'm sure that you could figure out a different wheel that would come up with a different rocker. I'm going to call it flat. I think all 4 wheels touching at the same time, it's pretty flat. And if it's rocker, as soon as you wear these down, they're going to be flat anyway. So anyway, we can argue all you want, but for most people, this is a flat style frame. What's interesting about it is that the middle wheels are smaller. Now, why would anybody do the middle wheels smaller? Well, if you look at the gap between wheels 3 and 4, you see how close it is. Now, what other frame, here's a pop quiz, what other frame had a gap this close? It was the Kaiser Element. So the Kaiser Element has a really close gap. Now, why can't a Kaiser Element, what's wrong with the Kaiser Element? Well, it is UFS, but it's also tall. And the problem with being tall is it's going to make a 58 millimeter wheel feel like kind of a 61 millimeter wheel, 62 millimeter wheel. And that is because of the UFS mount. You could see how close that UFS mount is. So how did Wish get around it? Well, they put the same size wheels, give or take, in the middle, but they have a big wheel on the outside. So they rockered this one down and it rides flat. So it's just smart math. If you look at this Kaiser Element, if you put a 72 mil wheel, you could see there's that much space on the bottom of the front and the back wheel. You could, if you rockered these up, or if you left these here and you rockered these down, put a bigger wheel on the outside, you could ride these flat just like the Wish frame. Now you can't rocker these frames, so this is a pretend world that I'm living in. But that is how they accomplished this amazing split, and that is why I think the Wish frame is an amazing frame. Not only does it have a flat setup, but it's got this huge groove. I mean, I can't even fit my hand. I can fit my whole hand in there. It's not wheel bite protection. These are like Antirockers. These are like juice blocks. So compare this to the Fitty Fitty balance frame. They're like juice blocks. It's like the same feeling. So you're skating on this frame material on the inside. The only time that you would get wheel bite is if you missed and if you got up too far on the wheels. But even then, the frame is angled at a point where it's nice and clean, so it's really hard to miss. These are an amazing frame. Some problems with this frame, for me personally, they feel a little bit taller than I'm used to, and I'm not a great skater, so when I try to do topside tricks, I struggle a little bit with these frames trying to get boot down. The reason is if you're coming up doing topside, if a topside for a flat frame, if a topside for a smaller frame is like this, if this is a taller, if there's more distance between the sole of the boot and the wheels, then on other frames, you got to get a little lower so that this angle compensates so that you're not rolling on the ledge. I had a really hard time when I was skating these last to get down low enough so that I wasn't rolling on the ledge. It still felt fine, but I slipped out a little bit. I think that if you are focused on doing topside tricks and trying to learn topside tricks like I am, maybe a smaller profile frame would be smarter. Obviously a 50-50 balance frame would work great, but there are other low profile frames out there. And the only other problem with the Wish frames is that they're a little expensive and you've got to get specialty wheels. You can't just ride, 4 60 millimeter wheels or whatever and rotate them around so that they all kind of wear evenly. You've got 2 different size wheels. That can be hard to find, can be expensive. You got to make sure that your wheels are fairly fresh. So it's definitely more of a niche frame, but it is an awesome frame. And if you have the means to get one and get the wheels and get some good bearings, I highly recommend skating them. I think they're an amazing setup for anybody who wants to try flat and really just wants to try the best technology that we have. I own a frame company, for crying out loud, and I highly recommend the Wish frames. I think that they're an amazing setup. One more thing. Now, I don't want to say that this is it. There are other flat frames. I have to be clear. There are other flat frames out there that I haven't skated. There's the Kaiser Slimlines that I hear are really great. There are probably a ton. There's the rollerblade. What are they called? The shift frames, switch frames. There are a ton of frames out there that I haven't skated. This is what I have in my personal collection that I have been able to skate, or the frames that I know about. The only other frame that I would talk about, and it doesn't really count, but it kind of counts, is my beloved USD Aeon. So this USD Aeon, what a great frame. It's not UFS. So this USD Aeon is a single piece mold. It is a boot frame. Everything is a single piece, so you can't replace these frames. So it doesn't count. But it is awesome. And if all that you're interested in is getting a single setup, and you don't care about swapping out frames for big wheels, and you don't care about swapping out frames for different styles, the USD Aeon is a great skate for aggressive. It's a great skate overall. If you look at the inside, a lot of hints from our old friend, the Kaiser Element. I mean, that split is very similar. You can see that groove, very similar. Doesn't go down as low as this one. This added the wheel bite protection. This frame probably came out, I don't know, somebody's going to have to correct me, but this frame probably came out before the wheel bite protection revolution started with the Cultic frame, with the K2 frame. Definitely this came out before the Wish frame. But these Aeons came out after. These are like 2015, I think they came out. Gives you a little bit of wheel bite protection. This groove, you know, as soon as I grind it a little further down, this groove will help me protect. I have never gotten wheel bite on these, and these are some Volo 88A 58 millimeter wheels. They are not hard, but I've never had wheel bite because this frame is just designed perfectly. The split is perfect, the wheel bite protection is perfect, the groove is perfect. The only problem is that it's not UFS. Now somebody could make this frame, like this Kaiser Element frame. They could copy this frame 100% and just make it taller. And I bet you it would sell pretty well. The UFS bolts are the problem. And again, you know, I have to point out that UFS bolt is right where this wheel is. If that UFS bolt was pushed out a little bit, we wouldn't have this problem. We could make this we could make this USD Aeon frame a UFS frame. But for now, this is what we got. If you want to skate, you know, an amazing flat setup, either you go with the Wish frames or you go with the USD Aeons. Me personally, I really like my Wish frames. I really like my 50/50 frames. There's, you know, of course I own the company, so a little bias there, but there's something about just having a tighter groove and even symmetrical wheels that I really like. I've been experimenting with wheels to try to find out the best profile for these wheels. I think that if I made a 58 or a 59 millimeter speed profile wheel, like if these faster wheels, like these were the K2 wheels. So these wheels were on this, a little pointier. I don't know. I'm testing them out. I really like this frame for Antirocker. I think that it could work well for flat. But if you're just getting started with flat, highly recommend the Wish frame. I think the Ground Control Megas are a great option. I haven't skated them, but I've heard really good things. And yeah, maybe the Kaiser Slimlines. Those are the three frames that I probably recommend. Again, I haven't skated the other two. I've just skated the Wish frames, which by far are my favorite. It's worth trying. I think a flat setup is a really great feeling. And you know, if you've skated Antirocker for a long time, give flat a try.